Hi there and welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire. A few days ago, I shared a technique that I called distress ink lifting. Many of you said you tried out the technique and loved it, so I thought I'd share a variation of that technique today so that you can get more from it. This is watercolor lifting, and I actually did some heat embossing with it to kind of capture some color underneath. Now, this technique is kind of hard to describe, but when you see it in action, it'll make complete sense. So I have a few cards to share with you today. So let's go ahead and get started with our backgrounds. I have some Tim Holtz watercolor paper here. You could use any kind of watercolor paper for this, and I'm going to tape it onto this cutting board. It's just a nice surface that is flat that I can pick up and move around. I can also use my heat gun on it. So I'm taping this down so the paper doesn't warp as we're working on it. Now for my watercolor, I decided to use some Tombow markers. You could also use distress markers for this, or Zig clean color real brush pens for this, or you can use real watercolors themselves. You'll just want to test out the watercolors first to make sure that they work with the lifting technique that we're going to do. I know Peerless works quite nice. You could also use distress inks for the background if you wanted to. So I just quickly scribbled some colors down on the background, and now I'm just taking some water and just kind of spreading it around and allowing the water to do the work for me. I'm not going to take any effort to blend this. I just want it to be kind of a fun, messy watercolor background. So you'll see me kind of dabbing water here and there. Now while that dries, I'm going to go ahead and do another panel. I like to do more than one card at a time. This time I'm going to do some pinks and some purples. Now you'll notice I'm not making sure to scribble that marker down perfectly. It really doesn't matter. You just want to get a lot of color down in the background. I really love the colors of these Tombow markers. They're very inexpensive, and you can use them with water as I'm doing today, or you can just use them for quick coloring. They're really high quality markers with a brush tip and a fine tip on the pen itself. Okay, so I let these dry for a while. In fact, I heated them with my heat gun because I'm impatient, and I just love the bold colors that you get in the background. So after I've heated these and they're completely dry, we want these to be bone dry, we can go ahead and move on to the next step. I want to trap some of that beautiful dark watercolor underneath some heat embossing. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool first. This will ensure that the powder doesn't stick everywhere. We want to make sure that we use that anti-static powder tool first. And I'm going to clear heat emboss these beautiful flowers and leaves from Paper Smooches. This is a great Paper Smooches stamp set. I arranged many of these images very close together on acrylic block so I could stamp a bunch at once. This way I can quickly cover the background and I don't have to do each stamp individually. So I'm first going to stamp one side of the paper with these flowers and leaves, and that's with Versamark ink. So I press that firmly down, and now I'm adding on some clear embossing powder. Now when I heat set this, you won't see much. You won't see much at all, but when we do our technique in a few moments, you'll be able to see it, no worries. Now after I've heat set this completely, I'm going to stamp again on the other side of the paper. So basically all I'm doing is stamping these flowers repeatedly on the background piece. If you have a background stamp, you could use that instead, but I really like the images in this Paper Smooches set. So once I have the entire piece covered with my clear heat embossed flowers, it's time to do the lifting. So I'm going to take just some clean water here, and I'm just going to apply clean water all over this background. My water is a little tinted from some color, but basically it's just water. So I'm just going to rub that over the whole thing, and watch as I dab it with a paper towel, or you can use a baby wipe, it lifts some of the color away. However, what's underneath that clear heat embossing is trapped, so it stays vibrant. So you get that vibrant watercolor look underneath those images, and then a softer watercolor look around it. This is just a fun way to get more out of your background stamps and your watercolors. I really found this technique to work great with these Tombow markers, but again, you can try your distress inks, your distress markers, or other watercolors. Okay, this is the other pink and purple background that I created before. I'm just taking some clean water, no additional color, and just kind of smearing it all over the top of the paper. Then I'm taking my baby wipe and dabbing some of that away, and it removes some of the color. You're lifting some of that color away. Again, the darker watercolor is trapped under the embossing, and the embossing resists that water we put on top. So only the things around the embossing become lifted. Now I decided there wasn't enough pink variation in my background, so I scribbled some of the pink marker onto an acrylic block, and I'm picking that up with my brush and kind of adding it in. So you can add new colors into the areas around the heat embossing, and the embossed image will resist anything you add. So this is a fun technique where you can do so many different things. Okay, so here are the two backgrounds here. I also created one that had some rainbows on it, so I wanted to show you that real quickly, a rainbow effect. I did some pinks and purples, and I moved on to my blues and greens. Not a complete rainbow, but I wanted to have lots of variation here. Again, you can see you don't need to take much effort at all to do this. You could also take your distress inks and smear them across the paper and add the water to it and get a similar effect. Okay, so after I've got all my marker down, I'm going to go ahead and add some water to it. And actually, I put a ton of water on this, even flicked some water on in the end. Let that dry, or you can zap it with your heat gun. Once you've dried it, you can go ahead and use your anti-static powder tool over the whole surface, and then clear heat emboss those same flowers repeatedly over the background. Now, I do want to mention, I think it's really important to use an anti-static powder tool over it, because sometimes that color that's already on the paper wants to hold embossing powder, and you just have a terrible mess in the background. There are different types of anti-static powder tools out there. I really like the EK Success one that I use. I just kind of shake it, and it puts some of that powder out. And if it leaves a little mark, that powder leaves a little mark behind, you just rub it away, and it'll be perfectly clean again. Okay, so I have that heat embossed. I wanted to show this up close. I'm just going ahead and adding clean water over this, and you can see it start to work right away. Now you take any kind of cloth or baby wipe here, and you can dab away or smear away some of that color, and check that out. You have that bright, vibrant watercolor trapped underneath the flowers, and you end up with a softer watercolor around it. And again, you can go in and add different colors here if you wanted to. I just wanted to keep the technique pretty simple and pretty quick. After I had my 3 background pieces done, I decided to go ahead and cut them up so that I could use them on several cards. I wanted to make a bunch of cards at once. So I have my Tim Holtz trimmer here, which I still love. I think this is a great trimmer, a great handy trimmer to have. And I'm just kind of trimming these pieces down so I can create a bunch of cards. Because I want to keep the rest of the card very simple so the focus is on the technique that we did, I decided just to add white to it. And the first thing I have is some white die-cut birdhouses. So I have this birdhouse die from Paper Smooches, absolutely adorable. It cuts 2 different size birdhouses and also the birds for it. And I die-cut a bunch of these from 110-pound white Neenah cardstock. Any kind of cardstock would work for this. I'm going to layer them on top of each other, so I end up with what looks like a white embellishment that I bought, but I really just created it out of layers of paper. Now, there are many ways you can layer up all these die cuts and glue them all on top of each other. Some people use a spray adhesive. I don't like spraying that in my house, and I don't like the fumes from it. So all I'm doing is putting some of my regular stamp runner adhesive that you see here in between each layer and gluing them together. This isn't really an intricate die cut. If it were intricate, I might have used a stick-it double-sided tape in between each of the layers when I go to die cut it. Or you can use a liquid adhesive, which you'll see me use in a little bit. But for these basic shapes, I just put regular adhesive in between each, and I layered 6 layers together. So it's almost like a chipboard embellishment that I created. Another option for this would be to die cut a piece of white craft foam and adhere that to the back of the paper die cut piece to give us dimension. Okay, so I've put some pieces of strong double-sided adhesive on the back of our birdhouse here. This will be great for securing it to the card, but also for holding a piece of floss behind it. So this is the white floss that I use when I do my felt stitching. It's a nice white floss. I'm putting one end behind the birdhouse. Now I'm going to stick the birdhouse onto our embossed piece that we created. And then I'm going to take the other end around the back of the piece and tape it to the back. And this will kind of make it look like the birdhouse is hanging there. I really like this Be Creative double-sided tape. I find it's super strong and great for making sure that those pieces will stay put. I did the exact same thing with the other birdhouse. I put double-sided adhesive on the back of it, added the floss, and now I'm taking the other end of the floss to the back. It was at this point that I decided to stop with the panel and get my sentiment done right. I wanted to make sure that I had room for my sentiment on my card. So I grabbed this Paper Smooches stamp set. This is a fantastic stamp set. It's called Fun and Flirty. I like the sentiment that says you are all kinds of wonderful. And I decided to chop that up. Don't worry, you can cut your stamps up without damaging them, and you can always mount them as they were originally intended. But I decided to chop this up so it was a stacked sentiment, not a long sentiment. This is a great way to extend the life of your stamps and get more uses from them. I usually start with the last part of the sentiment, whatever's on the bottom, and work my way up. That way I can make sure I get the spacing just right. So I'm doing this kind of off to the bottom left of my 4 1/4 by 5 inch card here. And I'm just using Hero Art's black dye ink. Okay, so now that I have that sentiment there, I can go ahead and glue my stamped panel down. I just used a bunch of that Be Creative tape, and it holds it wonderfully. Now you really want to press this down to make sure it stays. And actually before I mail this, I'll probably go squirt a little bit of the super strong Ranger multi-medium underneath the birdhouses just to make sure they stay put. Okay, now there were some other little pieces that were a part of the birdhouse dies. You have the little roof that I can add here. Since these are tinier, I'm using my Ranger multi-medium to add the adhesive for these. And I'm only putting 2 layers of each of the roof down, but by layering those up, you get some wonderful dimension. So after putting 2 roofs on both of my birdhouses, I wanted to add a little bird to this. And I didn't want to layer up 6 layers of the bird, so I only layered 2 or 3 of the birds together. Again, I used the liquid adhesive, and then I'm just adding him onto the roof of this birdhouse. And that adhesive's super strong and will hold nicely. And there you have those dimensional bird die cuts, all just from white cardstock. So I did a couple cards with this design, but for the pink and purple piece, I decided to go with a little bit of variation on the design, but I kept the focus on that watercolor technique that we did and just white die cut layered pieces. For the rainbow piece, I added a different paper smooches sentiment. I hope you'll give this watercolor lifting technique a try. It's fun with the heat embossing. For the products I talk about, they're linked below in my YouTube description. You can also go to my blog at jennifermcguireinc.com where I have a lot more information. In the middle are 2 other videos. There's the Distress Ink lifting video and also another heat emboss resist video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll come back soon.